It's a pleasure to talk to you because
Thank you. You too.
I'm a fan of the arrangements that you and your father Arnie have done for the Distant Worlds and Our New World. I was actually listening to Our New World just now because I hadn't listened to them before,
Which
and
one, the first record or the second record?
I was doing a mix of both. I went on
Okay.
Spotify and I listened to the most popular of the both, and I was blown away by some tracks specifically. The thing that I like a lot about A New World. By the way, sorry, we should start with an introduction, and so you can tell people who you are and stuff. Maybe
Oh, I'm happy to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
of
we
course.
just started randomly. We can start,
No,
doing the
it's my fault, Alex. Thank you.
no problem.
And I just didn't want to interrupt you when you were saying such nice things. But my name is Eric Roth. I'm the music director of A New World, intimate music from Final Fantasy, as well as a few other productions. I'm associate music director with Distant Worlds, and I suppose also with the Final Fantasy VII Remake orchestra tour, and who knows what else. My bio says I'm a composer, conductor, orchestrator, arranger, and producer of concerts and recordings, which
That's a
feels
lot
like
of hats to wear.
it feels like a succinct way to put it. So I go with that.
Well, that's it's an honor to be here with you because again, like I'm a fan of Final Fantasy music. I am a fan of the live shows that you guys do, like the orchestrations, and I'm a composer myself. I make orchestral music. I used to make orchestral music for movie trailers and stuff like that a lot. So when I come to the Distant Worlds concerts, I'm always like this, thinking like what's going on and organize, like analyzing the music, and it's very interesting to hear how you and your father Arnie, managed to breathe new life in some pieces of music that are already mind blowing by themselves.
That's very flattering. Thank you, Alex. And I am aware
Okay.
that you are of your career as a composer and
Thank you.
orchestrator and arranger.
That,
So
that's
thank you for letting me know. But it's my pleasure to be talking with you too. Somebody so
thank you so much.
esteemed and accomplished.
Well, like it's kind of meaningful for me because like I'm sure many people can relate to this as well. When I went to Distant Worlds the first time, I felt emotions that I didn't know I could feel anymore. Like for some reason, ever since I was 10 years old, I could not cry at all. I don't know what's wrong with me. But when I went to Distant Worlds 2017, the orchestra was playing the FF7 main theme, and behind them there was this huge screen with like the game running around, Cloud running around the world map, and I cried like a freaking baby, man. Like I was bawling like crazy. So
I thank you for sharing that. I understand, and that selection is one that moves me in deep ways too. I mean, especially as a musician, not just about the game, but like I listen to that piece that you're talking about in particular, and I think about Uematsu-san's incredible melodies in particular, and not just the fact that he's written so many of them, but the kind of care and beauty of how he's developed each one of them and the lives that they've lived, these melodies that he's constructed. And it is very moving as a musician. I mean, just on that level too. I know I'm not trying to ascribe those feelings to you, but I'm relating
no.
the feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. But how do you feel like having to work with such material? Like you are tasked of taking these historical pieces of music and arrange them for real orchestra, which is not always easy because at the time they were written with MIDI sound fonts and stuff. So translating them to real instruments already creates like a different mood. So it's like it must be very challenging to have to do that and maintain the soul of what they had as MIDI sound font pieces. Do you feel any like a kind of pressure or something like that when you're working on that, or does it feel more natural, for you?
I mean, pressure is not the word I would use. I would call it responsibility. You know what I mean? I feel a responsibility to the community of people who have such a deep relationship with this music before I get my hands on it. You know what I mean? So that responsibility is probably the largest one I feel. I also feel a lot of responsibility to the original composers and to the creators of the games, for that matter. It's their vision, know, and I take that seriously. I mean, it's I think you know what I'm talking about. As an arranger, because the way
It's terrifying for me, honestly.
you described the challenge pretty well, I think, is that you want to maintain the identity of the original in a meaningful way, where listeners are not feeling like, what is the identity of this piece?
Right?
You
Yeah.
don't want that question in their head. You want them to understand the identity
Hmm.
of the music, and you need to bring something fresh to the table.
Yeah,
You
that's
need
the
to,
biggest challenge.
right? Like, so getting that kind of balance and like understanding where you live as an arranger and orchestrator in this incredibly beautiful community is it's a serious responsibility and an incredible privilege.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
I want to ask you a few questions that people ask me, and I also want to talk about A New World because while I was listening to it, I was like, oh my God, this is some very good stuff. Like, for example, one of my favorite tracks is the track you made for Ivalice,
Ah,
Final Fantasy 12. Like, it's like
yeah.
this 8 minute and a half of like arrangements, like a medley of all the different melodies in Final Fantasy 12. And I really like A New World because Distant Worlds is freaking amazing. It's grandiose and stuff. A New World is more intimate, right? It's more like chamber music. But what I like a lot is that you take the liberty to arrange tracks that you probably would not hear at Distant Worlds that much, like the more obscure tracks. One Winged Angel, yes, you're gonna hear it all the time at Distant Worlds. But I don't know if I ever heard like a Final Fantasy 12 medley like that at Distant Worlds. That was very interesting. So I really like that.
You got the idea, right? They're really different kinds of productions, right? There's the big immersive experience of Distant Worlds and the big orchestra shows, the video and all that stuff, choir, um,
Yeah.
these kind of things. It's a lot of people, a lot of force. And then with A New World, we have these intimate chamber music shows that are in smaller halls where you really can understand exactly what every individual is contributing to the music, if you want to have that kind of attention, right? And
I don't
you're
want people to
absolutely
think that
right.
intimate. I don't want people to. I'm gonna stop you here for a second because
Oh, okay.
I don't want people to think that intimate means like smaller and stuff. No, it still sounds huge. I don't know how you do it, by the way. Like when I write orchestral music myself, I have to use like a big orchestral patches and stuff. Otherwise, it sounds very small. But you're able to summon a very big sound even with a smaller orchestra. I don't know how you do that. It sounds like magic to me.
Ah,
and
that's very flattering, Alex. Thank you so much.
And one of the questions that we got asked is exactly that. A friend of mine called Insane in the Rain, who's a composer as well, asked, how do you handle the process of arranging and preparing the music for the orchestra for these shows?
Yeah, it's
It's a loaded question.
major challenge, right? I mean, and it really depends on the different source material. I'll try to give some context as best I can without going forever.
Please.
Because honestly, like it's the kind of subject that I could talk about for a long time and get
Yeah.
into the nitty gritty as much as we want, like about individual things or whatever. But and that's not bragging. That's like talking about
No, I'm the same. I'm like, yeah.
yeah, it's fun and exciting, right?
I mean, you dedicated your life to music, so of course you're gonna have a lot
Exactly.
of things to say about it.
Thank you, Alex. That is how I look at it. About the process. I mean, this is a collaborative process, right? Is where it begins. So we're actually like Arnie and I are in discussion with our partners at Square Enix, with the composer of the particular piece, typically, to whatever. And these are to varying degrees. In the different moments, right? Like one composer, I'm going to keep this general, is
Yeah.
not necessarily going to weigh in as much on this piece at this moment as they did on this other piece at this other moment necessarily.
Oh.
You know what I mean? So there are a lot of moving parts here, but we'll have that discussion to start with. And then as far as the process goes, I mean, for me, it's really about how in my imagination, right, in my mind's ear, I can hear the original music existing with the different instruments, right, the different sound sources. So in the example of something that we think is really good for a big orchestra and choir, that's a little less intimidating in the sense that it's as you described. We're trying to make it very
Huge.
full and
Yeah.
beautiful and, you know, and balanced, right? I mean, balance is a huge thing in orchestration, right?
Hmm.
And you know, and these kind of priorities with the chamber music, right? It's a much more ethereal
Yeah.
achievement, I think, is the right
Because
way to
everything
put
you
it.
play like is very hearable, right? Every detail is
Right.
gonna be in the forefront.
Exactly. Totally exposed. Right.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, you need to be, well, one, I need to be very, very thoughtful about how I want to um, translate different original sounds
Hmm.
to the sound palette that I have to work from. Right.
Yeah, and also I suppose you want to write something that is like you want to arrange the music in a way that is fun to play for the instrumentalist, right? That is one challenge that people don't know about orchestral music is that if you take just the MIDI lines that were written and you just put them one to one and you say cello player play this, it might not as have been written to be performed by a cello player at first. So maybe if you have them play the exact same thing, it's not going to sound as convincing. So you kind of have to rearrange them in a way that sounds alive, it sounds made for orchestra, right?
That's right. I mean, or it might not balance as well on that particular instrument
Hmm.
if you just put it all in that instrument. There are, you know, it might the range of it might present some challenges that you don't really want to have
Hmm.
things that listeners are experiencing from the music. Like you might not want that melody to sound difficult,
Yeah,
right? So, you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
there are times when you do like a melody is like virtuosic and that's desirable, but there are other times where it's like, whoa, that sounds too high for the cello, and maybe that should be viola,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You know,
exactly. Or you don't
or
want some,
some,
I don't know, brass instrument to hold a note forever and run out of breath and die on the stage. Those are
right.
real issues.
Yeah, and there's one thing I guess I'll just say that I think that there's a something that less experienced orchestrators get into a lot is trying to do a one-to-one
Yeah,
translation where it's
yeah,
like this sound that I hear in the original music is going to live on this instrument, you know? And I think that that is probably not the best way to approach things generally for reasons that you addressed. And I
yeah.
think also when we're talking about digital sounds,
Mm,
we don't necessarily want that digital sound that, you know, listener X has a deep relationship with because they know this music back and forth over and over again to be identified with a B flat clarinet.
yeah, that is very tricky though because like sometimes we have games that get remastered. Like they will go from a PS2 release to a
Yeah.
PS4 release, and they remaster the soundtrack, and they take the
Yes.
digital like soundtrack from PS2 and remodernize it with modern sounds. And in doing that, sometimes we lose some details like that. This weird melody played on this instrument where it shouldn't belong, but because it was digital, it was fine. Now on PS4, then they're not going to do the same thing. And sometimes that is better on technical level, but the listeners feel like, oh my god, I missed that special something, and so
Right. There's something missing, right?
yeah, it's
Yeah, that's
very,
right.
very,
Yeah.
very hard to translate stuff for orchestras and make it sound still engaging and very interesting. But what I was listening to A New World, and I'm not like saying this just to give an impression or something. No, no, no. I was listening to it and I was like, wow, I get why this is called A New World because you get to experience these memories, these memorable soundtracks in a completely new way that is actually freaking cool. Like Chaos Shrine from Final Fantasy One, that arrangement you guys wrote is so amazing. It was so freaking cool. Like it's very nice. So I really appreciate it. Even One Winged Angel,
Ah,
like it was very fun to hear One Winged Angel in that like more intimate setting. So
thanks, man.
yeah,
I really appreciate that. You know, it's I feel like that's where the creativity comes in, right?
yeah,
Of what we do is actually having ideas to bring the richness of those original experiences with us to these
yeah,
new settings, right?
yeah.
Like that's where our creativity and skills are. So, I mean, that makes me feel really great to hear you talking about Chaos Shrine that way in
Nice.
particular.
It's very
Yeah.
deserved. What was your favorite track of all the ones you arranged on A New World?
My
What was the most
favorite.
favorite and also the most difficult? Like two of them, like favorite and
Well,
difficult.
actually, favorite is really hard, but difficult. I mean, maybe the most intimidating
Yeah.
was the orchestration of Xanarkand.
Ooh.
Um,
Yeah.
because I think you know intuitively what I mean, right?
Yeah.
It's like this, the Hamaguchi, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To begin with, the old orchestration, we'll put it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is so gorgeous and means so much to so many of us that I don't feel that good about creating a smaller orchestration that doesn't approach that feeling close enough.
Yeah,
You know what
it's
I
very
mean?
tough. And that soundtrack has been touched by so many, like Uematsu,
Oh
the main
yeah.
composer, Hamauzu rearranged it in Final Fantasy X, and so many other people took it for a ride. And yeah, I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying.
So that one felt particularly intimidating, and I feel like a real sense of pride in that particular achievement. The something that I always feel really great about, as like I'll just use this as a favorite, is I still feel really great about the Fight with Seymour
Ooh.
string quartet version. I feel
I,
like it was like
I
I
gotta
feel like it
listen
was
to
a
it.
really good idea, and it's really fun, and it's not like the original, but it achieves that balance that I was talking
Yeah.
about retaining the identity of the original and bringing something really fresh to the table in a really surprising way. And that's how Uematsu-san felt about it too. He was like, wow, I didn't see that coming and I
Man, it
really
must be
like it,
amazing to
you
get
know?
praise from Uematsu himself. Like, I was talking with him on a Zoom call just a few months ago. It was insane. Like, I lost my freaking mind. In the call, I was being serious. I didn't want to show my fanboy, but
I
I was
understand. Yeah.
I was going crazy inside. And I showed him one of my Final Fantasy VII arrangements, and he really liked it. And I was like, oh my god,
I
so
know.
emotional. So it must
That's
be
a
crazy.
I know what you're talking about. He's a very generous, beautiful guy,
Yeah.
in how he interacts with others, as in my experience. And it does feel great to be able to interact with him and like talk about music. I mean, we've talked about music so much. It's like I'm never gonna lose those
Yeah.
interactions. So I feel pretty great
What
about
was
that.
the best thing you learned by talking with him, like about anything, music or life or whatever? Like for me, by talking with him for 1 hour, I was shocked at how humble he is. Like I was like, a composer of this stature, if he had a bit of ego and be like, yeah, I'm the best or whatever, I would understand that. If he was excited to talk about himself and stuff, I would understand that. But he was super chill, and he was just, he was more humble than most people I met in my life. And I felt very stupid for the times I have not been humble myself in the past. And I was like, man, if Nobuo Uematsu is humble, despite being Uematsu, I have no business being, feeling too good about myself. So
Well, I understand that perspective. Please don't be too hard on yourself. I mean,
no,
like
but I was like, I was really impressed by that dichotomy. So
I understand what you mean. He is a very humble person in his disposition in the world.
yeah, it was very shocking for me to see, and I'm like, yeah, of course, that's Uematsu. He's great.
But oh, you know what about your question about like
Yeah.
something that's really great that I've learned from him is, one of the coolest things about being an assistant or associate music director, however you want to talk about it, not the guy who's actually running the rehearsal, in that moment, is that I can be out there in the hall during sound check as a different set of ears sometimes.
Yeah.
And I can talk to Uematsu-san, ask him like where he's at, what he's hearing, if he needs something, if he has any thoughts or something like that. And even those tiny exchanges, just getting to understand what he's paying attention to in those moments have been really elucidating for me. Like little things he'll say about tempi, or little things he'll say about like, I want to hear this particular like counter melody a little
Oh, I knew
louder
you
or
were gonna
something
say
like
that.
that. It's really interesting to be able to see what are his priorities, in that short amount of time, like where we only have like, I'm only going to have like 30 seconds, when Arnie turns around and is like, you guys have anything to, that I need to know about. Right. So Uematsu-san knows that. And he's saying like, here's the stuff that I'm noticing. So in those moments, I feel like I've learned a lot about what he's paying attention to. So that's pretty cool.
That's nice.
That's one of the coolest things. Yeah.
We're both music nerds, and I feel like we're getting lost in our music talks already. I can see the audience being like, I don't understand what they're saying. So
Oh
I'm trying
no.
to keep this interview on a surface level so everybody can understand. But I'm sorry if we delve into places
No
that are too.
apology is necessary to me, and I will do my best. Please be strong with me to make sure that I keep my
Let's do
focus the
this.
right way. Yeah.
People have asked, like, have you grown up playing the Final Fantasy games? Like, what's your relationship to Final Fantasy before starting to work on Disney Worlds and A New World? Were you a gamer?
I didn't grow up as a gamer, and I never pretend to be. You know what I mean? It's like I would never want to do that and try to pretend to be something I'm not.
Lots of people in game audio are not necessarily gamers.
Right.
This is quite normal.
Right. What I did do is, like, because as a kid, as a young person, I was always about music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I did do is like what I wasn't interested in doing is learning how to use the controls and like learning all the stuff like that. What I did think was cool was watching my friends play and hanging out and chatting and listening to the music and having those kind of experiences. Like we did that with all sorts of games, including Final Fantasy.
So people
games.
wanted to know like how you feel about the evolution in the music in the series, because it has kind of fluctuated and changed. Like because after Uematsu left as the main composer, people started to come on like Hamauzu or Takeharu Ishimoto, Yoko Shimomura, Masayoshi Soken, and the music in the game changed in a way that for me was quite refreshing. And I'm curious about what you think about, like, how do you feel about the evolution in the music in the series? Because I see that A New World has like a lot of music from the newer Final Fantasies, 15, 14, 13 and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating subject, actually, and I think that you did a good job of describing it very quickly. But it's actually like, as you know, a lot more complex and complicated than that, right? There's overlap, with more than one composer working on different games, and that's before you even get to like the different spin-off games and how the music from those informs the main series and vice versa, right? So I think it's a really fascinating and rich topic to talk about. In lots of different ways, from technology to musical personality to the feedback of the community and the professional community. I think it's a fascinating subject that we could talk about for hours and hours.
For me personally, I feel like they keep on adding stuff that becomes the soul of the game. Like like Uematsu just defined the core sound of Final Fantasy, obviously. With these many themes that keep on resurfacing even now that he's not the main composer anymore. And he gave like this strong identity melodically to Final Fantasy. Then came Hamauzu, who creates these insane harmonies that are full of chords that are very weird, like 9th, 13th chord, whatever. I don't know what wizardry he does. And so he created this sense of like harmony that is very complex and human. And then Soken with Final Fantasy 14.
Excuse me, and don't forget the new identity of piano in the music that comes from Hamauzu too. It's not just the harmony; it's like the actual, and also piano starts to mean something different, right? And sound design,
He's such a unique composer. Like, he's probably one of my favorites, actually.
Absolutely.
And I think the nice thing is that with FF7 Remake, for example, we saw all of that come full circle, because we have a soundtrack based mostly on Uematsu's works, remodernized by Hamauzu, Yoshitaka Suzuki, Mitsuto Suzuki, and all these different composers from the Square Enix gang. And they basically take all the things that happened in the previous soundtracks and they bring them forth with even newer stuff. So I feel like the Final Fantasy as a brand is like, with every new Final Fantasy, they experiment with something new while also maintaining what came before. So the music in this game keeps on getting better and better. It's insane.
I agree with that synopsis. I think that the remake project is fascinating and excellent in the ways that you describe. I mean, it's and I think that you also describe something that's really cool. Like, you think about some of the early games, and there are things that happen, different Chocobo versions and whatever, but something like in 15, where it really feels a lot closer to Cubano music at
Mm.
times. Like
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
wasn't something that was in the earlier games, for example. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
now, like, it's part of our world, right? In a
And it's very
really
interesting
cool
because like
way.
15 also has this super epic apocalyptic orchestral music that sounds like
Right.
Karl Orff or Fortuna
Yeah.
or something.
Right.
So it's very ambivalent.
Or something that Shimomura does like Samnus,
Yeah.
like where it's just like, oh, okay, now I'm just gonna get slayed for a little while here,
Yeah.
It's like,
That's how it
that's a
is.
very different kind of feeling than some of the beautiful melodies that we associate and constructions that we associate with some of the
Mm.
earlier music also. And I
Yeah.
don't mean one is like, more beautiful or less beautiful or
Yeah, it's
anything like
just like
that,
it
but
goes to show how much a composer can say with her music,
yeah,
you know.
and it's and something that you were saying is that it speaks to the strength of the series, the developers' vision,
Yeah.
that these musical personalities can not only be integrated in beautiful and robust ways, but actually add to the strength
Yeah.
of the identity of what comes before and what comes in the present and future.
Well, you and Arnie are part of that as well because like going to your concerts is a freaking experience, and I totally recommend anyone who likes Final Fantasy games to go, like both the Distant Worlds and a New World, which are different things. So you have like a New World there's a new tour coming right now.
Well, we have a lot of shows coming up.
Yeah.
We're starting at the first thing we have coming up right now is that we're performing at the Anime Frontier convention, which is new in Fort Worth, Texas. But then in January, we have concerts in Berkeley, California, and San Diego, California,
Hmm.
Houston, Texas. And these are all in beautiful, intimate halls where you can. I mean, it sounds great. I've played at each of those places before. They sound great.
Yeah.
You're it's worth it. You know what I mean?
This stuff makes me envious about Americans. You guys get the best shows all the time. I'm here in
Ah,
Prague, and sometimes I get something. But if you guys are in America, check out A New World from me because I can't go there yet. But I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite memory from touring with A Distant Worlds or A New World? And what's your funniest memory from touring also? Like something that happened while you were playing there, performing there, conducting. Do you have some
I mean,
memories like that?
favorite is so hard. You know what I mean? Because there's been so much joy
Yeah.
and incredible experiences that I've been privileged to have happen with me because I have become a part of this community.
Hmm.
So I've met incredible people all over the world, been in incredibly beautiful halls in really special places, these things like that. So favorite in early 2018, Distant Worlds came to Carnegie Hall in New York for the first time, right?
Mm.
And it was the beginning it was January 13th or something like that. Early January. It's cold, it's winter, and like sold out 2 shows in one day.
Wow.
And yeah, and before the first show, I'm sitting there at the stage right door. Sitting
Yeah.
is not correct. I was standing, but that's not the point. And the door is slightly ajar, right? Just it's not showtime quite yet. It's just a few minutes before showtime, and I'm looking out that stage right door at a full house in Carnegie Hall of our incredible community, getting ready for these 2 concerts that day. And that's just a moment I'll never forget in terms of
Yeah.
like, it was overwhelming. And I know that that's not a performance experience, per
No, but I can
se,
imagine
but
like the feeling of seeing
yeah,
so many people being passionate about this music so much that they feel a stage like that, like
right.
a hall like that.
And in that place. Now here's a real funny one that I've told before, so please forgive me, people who have heard it before, but it was pretty funny. It was at Otakon, the convention in Washington D.C., which is wonderful. Our great friends run it. Love Otakon.
Hmm.
It was the only time that there was a Distant Worlds performance and a New World performance as part of a single convention.
Wow.
And so Friday night was the Distant World show, and then Sunday afternoon was the A New World show. So, Distant World show happened. Saturday we did some things. Sunday, here we are. We're doing the A New World show, and it's the end of the show. There was some pressure on it for me in the sense that Uematsu-san is there in attendance. Performing at a convention is always like a little bit of a wild card in the sense that like unanticipated things happen.
Yeah, conventions are intense.
Right.
They can be crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and it's been a great performance, been having a great time, lots of love, lots of fun. It's the encore, doing, I'm not going to ruin anything because I've been doing this for a while now, where we pull out our Chocobo medley for the encore. And there's like this little thing where we do the Samba de Chocobo as part of it. And I whip around from my position as conductor and face the audience and start performing the samba whistle part on a slide whistle, right? It's silly, it's fun, it works with the music, it's a lot of fun. And this particular time, I turned around, flipped around, about to do the first sound on the slide whistle, and the thing breaks into one,
No.
Yeah, just like right in that moment before I make a sound, like one piece is in one hand, the other's on the floor. And the part with the slide just falls out. It's on the floor.
Oh my God.
The other is in my hand. So, Alex, I'm a performer. In the moment, I start, I'm like, okay, I'm going to sing this part. I start singing the slide whistle part into the microphone. Like I'm doing that stuff.
That's
amazing. And the place is going nuts, right? Because it's hilarious. It's really silly.
Yeah, people don't often see conductors like, breaking, like that.
Yeah, breaking the fourth wall or whatever.
Like you have to be like formal and stuff, right? That sounds amazing.
Yeah, so we do this and finish the piece. It was incredibly fun. Like everybody's cracking up, dying laughing. Uematsu-san comes up on stage. Like we take some bows. We're dying laughing. We go backstage. And it's this convention center, so it's not like there's a traditional green room situation. So we're back here in this convention center hallway, just him and me. And it takes us about 10 minutes to compose ourselves from laughing hysterically. And that's all we're doing for like a long time, like not even like using any words, because we're just like dying laughing about what just went down for a while. And I'll never forget that. That was a really precious, funny.
That sounds freaking amazing. I wish I was there to see it. Yeah. Oh my God. Wow, that's I commend and I compliment your skill to be a showman in such stressful situations. It's in those moments that you realize who's the real showman, who's not.
That's right.
That's very nice. That is very nice. Okay, people wanted to also know, since you're a composer and you're an arranger and you work with Final Fantasy music so closely, is there a piece from a piece of music on a Final Fantasy game that you think is underrated and you'd like people to listen to it more? Is there one game that you feel like you want to feature more in your A New World concerts? One game for Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to ask it. I mean, I think I'll say it this way. I think there's a lot of music in 11.
Oh yeah.
That I think gets maybe a little bit of short shrift. Like a lot of beautiful music in 11. I think that Mizuta-san is
he's amazing.
I think he's a very unusual and beautiful composer.
Right. Yeah.
And he, in a very special kind of way, like his own special kind of way. He's also a very beautiful person. I really love him to death. He's like such a great person in my experience.
Yeah.
And all the time we've spent together is really special to me. I feel like there's more there. The problem with talking this way is that no sooner do I say this than I think about some of Sakimoto's, like incredibly special.
Guy is in. Okay, so you just named two of my favorite composers,
right?
Mitsuta,
you know what I mean?
I love Mitsuta's work on. I haven't played 11, but I've seen the catalog of music it has, and I'm like, whoa, why is no one talking about this? But I really like in Final Fantasy 13 too. He made some themes for Cayuse Ballad, who's the antagonist. and they sound so operatic, and the orchestrations are so incredible. Like from an orchestral standpoint, I hear things that I'm like, whoa. Even the way he uses like woodwinds and stuff is so rare. No one does that anymore.
I agree. I feel like he's a really creative musical
Yeah, and
force.
also
Yeah,
he's very good at producing electronic music. Like sometimes on Twitter, he posts these electronic music snippets, and they're so good. Like I don't know, like
absolutely.
I wouldn't associate such a classical operatic composer with that type of electronic music, but he can do both masterfully. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do that as well
Yeah, well, I
someday.
think it's important to understand with a guy like that and Sakimoto, they have this in common in this way. I think
Yeah, oh my god, yeah.
they're very personal composers. You know what I mean? It's like a very personal vision is where they're coming from. So when they're existing in more orchestral world as you describe it or whatever,
Yeah,
or they're existing in a more electronic sound
yeah,
source world, that's not the determining factor. That's how they're trying to get their ideas out. You know what I
yeah.
mean? So it's pretty exquisite. They're both very exquisite composers that way. Really
Yeah,
special.
Sakimoto's like, I wish people would give orchestral music a bit more of a chance in a way, because I get the feeling that when people hear the word orchestral, they instantly think of like, oh yeah, this is gonna be like those Marvel Avengers movie scores, which are great, but there's so much more nuance to orchestral. It's not just if it's orchestral, then it's gonna be a Marvel movie. There's so many types of orchestration, and Sakimoto specifically, like in Final Fantasy 12, created this sound, which is like Final Fantasy meets Star Wars, and it's
Right.
freaking perfect.
Right.
And I'm like, to this day, when I listen to that, I keep finding new things that blow my freaking mind. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, it's so visionary. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I wish people
Alex, you
could.
make a really good point about like attitudes about orchestral music and
Yeah,
things like that. I think that I think it's important that we're thoughtful, and I don't mean you and me
yeah,
and
yeah.
you and
In
I
general,
only,
yeah,
but I think in general about what are the barriers that keep these musics apart, right? Because it's
yeah,
not the listeners, necessarily and their attitudes that
hmm,
are keeping these music, different musics from being more fully integrated, so these are bigger forces and historic forces that make it harder or more challenging for for some people to relate to some musics versus some people to relate to other musics or
yeah,
whatever, and I think it's important that the community and people generally understand that it's not your job as a listener, to challenge yourself to get next to orchestral music. You know
yeah,
what I mean? It's
yeah, yeah,
that's not on you. Love what you love, and let's
yeah.
take it from there.
That's a very healthy view, because some people can be a bit elitistic, like, oh, you don't understand, you don't appreciate the best of music. You should get that.
I mean, my feeling is like, look, every day of my life, I'm out there trying to hear music that I haven't heard before because that's something I love and I just can't get enough of it. It's like I have an insatiable appetite for music that I don't know yet that is exciting to me.
Right.
And one of the best things about feeling that way is that I know that I could do that every day of my life and there would still be much, much more than I've ever heard that I don't know about.
Yeah, about that. Is there some music from some other game that you would love to arrange? Like, if you could, I know maybe you cannot do this because of New World and these the words are about Final Fantasy, right? But if you could add a guest game from outside the Final Fantasy series, is there some other games you would like to arrange music for?
Well, Alex, we do have another production that's outside, that's out, does music from a bunch of games outside of Final Fantasy, and that's what
Which one is that?
we call it open world video game music live in concert. We just had a digital an appearance at well, I guess the audio and video performance at the GX digital event from Kuwait City. That's
Wow.
Fikra Productions runs that one. Fikra
Okay.
Events, our great friends there,
Hmm.
took a new world there in 2019. We performed in Kuwait at the Real GX convention.
That is crazy.
I know, it was amazing. It was amazing, an amazing experience. But open world, we do music from. I mean, so we did 4 tracks in this in this performance where we did music from Pokemon Red Blue, games. We did music from DuckTales.
Wow, really?
We
Those are
did.
deep cuts.
I know,
Oh my
right?
god.
And we did music from Horizon, right?
Okay,
So
okay.
that's like much more recent,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, so we have things that go really old and things that go to today in
That is
that
amazing.
production. Yeah.
So it seems
So
like the more like Distant Worlds is like, mainstream Final Fantasy music, which is like, the tracks we all know. A New
mhm.
World is the more obscure, and then there's Open World, which is even more obscure with DuckTales and stuff like that. So the deeper you go, the more video game music you get exposed to. That is like, I like that. That's very cool. Like it
well,
gives a different reason to go to each one of these events, right?
yeah, I mean, I would say with a new world, doing some deep cuts is part of the plan, but it's not, but we try to mix it up. There's a lot of variety,
Yeah.
so you're going to get some of your favorites. You're going to get some things where you're like, oh, I know that music, but like, oh, that's that from that village or from that, whatever, like that sort of stuff. But open world, it's really more variety, like from long ago through today, and we're adding stuff all the time and whatever.
Hmm.
So I think that you summarized it in a pretty okay way.
People wanted to know how you select what songs to do in Distant Worlds and A New World, like for the new albums. Like you have such a
Yeah.
huge variety of songs that you can choose from all these games. How do you choose which ones to do? Like, is it you want to do something that's fun, that sounds good, or you want to do something that the audience knows? Like, what is the determining factor?
Yeah, it's really complicated, is the truth. I mean,
I can
there's
imagine. Like, I panic when I have to decide what music to make videos about on YouTube.
well, if it were all up to me, that would be a lot simpler. You know what I mean? But it's actually a collaborative process,
Hmm.
right? Like, so an idea for this, including this track, might come from me, or come from Arnie, or come from the people at Square Enix, or it might come from one of the composers, right? That the initial idea can come from any of us in
Hmm.
that sense. The kinds of criteria we use for choosing are different for different situations. It could be something about like, we need more from this game, right?
Yeah.
Or it could be we need more of a different kind of mood, right? We need something that's like more up tempo. We need more up tempo for we haven't added a new up tempo thing. Or there are lots of different considerations that go to adding new music. It's really
Like I
complicated.
suppose you wanna build like a set list on your concerts and albums that has a certain vibe, and you kinda it's like architecting like a building. You have to have some foundations that hold the whole thing, and then you have something on top which is nice, blah blah blah. So it's not whatever
Right.
you want to do. You could just consider the entire experience to give a
That's
certain
right. I
journey,
mean,
right?
for performance, for
Yeah.
a recording, for all of these things, I think you're absolutely right. I think
Wow.
that I mean, and that's before we even, and people ask us all the time, like, when are you going to throw in some tactics music or something like that?
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like, can you imagine like how much more complicated this will get when like when we start like including all of
There is
all of
one
the
track
possibilities,
that
right?
people have asked for in the comments that I'm sure probably no one will ever have the courage to perform. It's called
Ooh,
Almighty Bunivelze from
I
Final
know that
Fantasy.
tune. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of the most insane pieces of music I've heard in a video game. Like it's
Well,
so
what
complex.
if we can do Dancing Mad? Why can't we do that?
I mean, it's true. Actually, you have a good point. I was there, by the way, when you played Dancing Mad at Royal Albert Hall with
Yeah.
the 7,100 pipe organ.
Yeah, I
It
know. It's
was
crazy. It
it
was
was
crazy.
ridiculous. Was that the most ridiculous performance you ever made, or is it something else like that was apart from the chocobo with the tin whistle sang by you and Dancing Mad? Were there other performances that you can tell us about to sell this tour to people who haven't seen that? Because it's really special. It's really amazing. But is there some memory of some crazy performance that you like?
Yeah,
Can
I
tell
mean,
us?
when we've done the opera with the Earthbound Papas, I mean, like that sort of stuff. I mean,
Ooh.
that's been pretty intense, like that, or even just doing the opera any old time, even without
The Final Fantasy 6 opera, like Maria and
yeah,
Taco.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I
Is
mean,
that is that
that
like 20 minutes long or something? How
it's
long
not
is it?
quite that long in this
No?
in the arrangements that we perform, but
Okay.
it's plenty of music. and
Yeah.
and I don't know if I've performed the narrator part on
Oh,
that many times,
okay.
which is really. that's an interesting challenge because we're talking about, in the game, right? That's just
Yeah, yeah.
text there. There's no sound that goes with that, right? So it's an interesting kind of challenge to like live in that performance mode in a way that people feel okay about, you
Hmm.
know. But it's so much fun, and I love being there and being a part of that community in that way.
Yeah, honestly,
That
after you told me about the
yeah.
Chocobo Whistle story, I trust you with anything. Just that's. I definitely want to come see the New York concert just for you because I'm sure
Oh,
the orchestra
thanks.
is amazing as well. Like, do you change orchestra on every tour or is it following you around? Like,
Oh, we couldn't do it if we were taking everybody on tour. I mean, we
so like you have
yeah,
orchestra rehearse the songs on every different city, kind of.
that's right. That's right.
And is there a piece of music that they struggle a lot with, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think we get some reactions about the Fight with Seymour quartet plenty of times. Yeah, I mean, since I mentioned that before,
Oh my god.
there are other things where people, I mean, like where musicians are like, wow, I mean, wow, we're doing this, tonight. It's like,
And they have to learn it right. Like they have like one afternoon to learn it, and then that's it.
no, 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 no. They get the music well in advance to
Oh, okay,
prepare
okay,
it,
okay.
but with A New World, we're doing one rehearsal and doing the show.
Whoa,
Like
that's
we're
crazy.
the day of, we're doing a rehearsal, and then we take our break, and then we get dressed and do the show.
You must have caused so much panic in the world, Eric.
You know,
In the musicians. No, I'm just
I
kidding. But like
I
for
know, I understand your point, Alex.
no, they're professionals. They're
They're professionals,
professionals.
but it's asking a lot. It's a serious challenge to be in a totally exposed situation like that, performing chamber music, that
But
you
it's also
don't
what
do
they sign up for.
regularly.
Actually, like musicians
Yes,
like the challenge. They like to be excited. That's how you get in
that's right.
flow. If you are, this is too easy, you don't get in flow. But if
Yeah.
it challenges you, you really transcend, and it creates the best performances. So that's one thing that makes me even more interested to come see A New World.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I think that kind of energized quality to our
Yeah,
performances, like that kind of edge,
yeah.
is part of what makes it special, actually.
Okay, man. Well,
Uh,
we answered to quite a few questions in our conversation. I'm sure we could talk about so much more, but I want to let you go and be with your kid a bit. But first, I wanna share something with you. Since you're a composer, I'm a composer as well,
yes.
and you work with Final Fantasy music. I wanna show you one of my Final Fantasy VI covers. I'm gonna show you 2 minutes of my Terra's theme arrangement, and I'd like to know what you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be
Okay.
happy to. are some of the things I like. It's only 2 minutes, man, and it's an excerpt, so it's hard for me to talk about it in terms of like structure and things like that. But in the 2 minutes, I like the development in particular.
Thank you.
Like where you're being thoughtful about like where you take the melody.
Yeah.
That you're going to keep it moving around in.
I'm glad you noticed that.
Yeah, in ways that make sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like so that you're keeping the integrity of the melody that we all know and love, right?
Yeah.
I like that. I like that you throw in some judicious harmonic moves that are, it's a nice balance actually in that particular way.
Thank you.
You're thoughtful about where they happen, how quickly they happen, how many times you do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I think that those are strengths.
Thank you so much.
In my estimation. Here are things that like I ended up wanting more of as a listener when I was in there. I want to hear the melody more prominently at all times. I feel like when it's with the harp at the beginning, some of the other harp figures
it gets in the way.
Not necessarily get in the way as much as like have too much relative importance versus the melody. You know what I mean? And I also feel like you don't need to be as straight with it. You know what I mean? Like you could add a little more personal touches, whether it's like ornamentation or whatever, not to force it, but to give it a little zhuzh, if you know what I mean. And then like, that I end up sitting here listening to the melody at this tempo. That's an important part of it, right? And I end up feeling like there's a lot of space here, that could, that we could hear the possibilities therein if we just did a little bit of something.
That is
just
so
a little bit.
That is because you gave me an answer that I totally appreciate the advice, by the way. That is, I didn't think about this. And this opened my eyes on two things. Like the first thing you told me is like melody first. Like I want to hear it clearly. So it tells me when you're writing your A New World arrangements, you are really putting yourself aside. You're like, this is what you came for. Like this melody is the stuff that you remember so well. I don't want to put my ego in here and show you how great I am. I just gave you what you came for. But at the same time, you give these kind of like new detours that give a new direction and a new path to explore in these melodies that people know. And then you take them back to what they knew. So really, man, I'm so curious. I think I'm going to skip listening to the rest of the A New World albums because I want to listen to them live the first time. So I will save that. I don't know when you guys are coming to Germany also, like in 2022, right? In Düsseldorf.
Yeah, we do have concerts there. Yeah.
I'll try to get myself there. If you come to Europe, I'll try to get myself there because I'm so curious about what you came up with in the several Final Fantasy arrangements you did, knowing that this is your mindset. Because it's so difficult to have this balance of like being faithful to the original and also creating some new world to travel in. Yeah. But it seems like that you've mastered that through the years. So,
well, that's. I mean, nobody ever masters it, but that's very flattering to hear that. Let me just add one other thing about your excerpt before we finish that, which is that for me, tempo is such a big deal in any orchestration or arrangement or performance, for that matter, right? And you made a decision about tempo in this piece, and it means a lot of different things. You know what I mean? Like, because it means all sorts of things about time, feel, how long the melody takes, what the accompaniment feels like, how the harmonic, rhythm feels and the changes and things like that. So I guess I would put it to you, like, do you feel like this tempo is achieving like everything that you want from it? You know what I mean? And I'm not telling you I think it's not.
No. That's a very interesting question. I've never consider my music in this perspective,
because there are options. You know what I mean? Like, it's a continuum. It's a non-finite thing, right?
Wow.
So So it's I guess to me, I would put that to you, like,
Did you?
because you made a real choice. You know what I mean? And I'm
Yeah,
not saying
yeah.
you shouldn't have done that.
No,
That's
no,
not my
no, no,
point
no,
at
no,
all.
no.
You have
I,
to, right? You
yeah,
have to make a choice. Like, it's going to be at some tempo. It's going to be at some speed,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Did you study philosophy by chance or something like that? Are you interested in? Because like your view of music is very, very interesting,
I
interestingly
thank
deep
you.
and philosophical.
Well,
Yeah.
I do read a lot, and like I said, I mean, there's nothing I love more than music I haven't heard before. You
Hmm.
know, that's making me like think about things in new ways.
Yeah. That's so interesting. That's wow, man. Okay. You I hope people who watch this interview are gonna be interested in checking out A New World. The albums are on Spotify and on digital stores, right? People can get them
Oh yeah,
anywhere.
anywhere,
And there's also
and
this.
especially Bandcamp, I will say. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
just
and
for
then
what
on
it's worth.
Bandcamp I
Yeah,
saw there's these collections, like you have 7 or 8 like collections of Final Fantasy VII music from A Distant Worlds and A New World together, right?
that's right.
Albums like that. So
We've
you have
done a few of those collections as well.
thematical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will link all of them in the description of this video. I recommend any Final Fantasy fan to check them out because if you didn't understand it from this interview, I don't know how you didn't, but if you didn't, the music Eric writes and arranges is quite unique. And even though you've heard these pieces of Final Fantasy music all your life, experiencing them like this is gonna hit different. For what I've heard in the few tracks I heard, I was already like, yes, this is great. And now talking with you, I'm like, he knows what he's talking about. So
Thank you,
check
Alex.
them
That's
out.
very flattering in a lot of different ways. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries. Hey, say hi to Arnie from my part, by the way. Big fan of him as well.
You
And
got it.
yeah, looking forward to hear you guys perform live again in the future. Thank you
Oh,
so
me
much.
too. Won't that be great? Like, we'll be together, feeling the
Yeah.
vibrating air molecules together, and like all
Yeah.
that stuff. I mean,
I
it's what
dig
it's
it.
all
I dig
about.
it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank
See you
you,
soon.
Alex. Talk to you later. Have a
Bye
great day.
bye.
Goodbye.